They were warriors of God, feared on the battlefield and shrouded in mystery. The Knights Templar, a legendary order that rose from the blood-soaked sands of the Crusades to become one of the most powerful and secretive organizations in history. Cloaked in white robes marked by a red cross, they vowed to protect pilgrims, but their influence soon stretched far beyond the Holy Land. From hidden treasures to secret rituals, and a downfall as dramatic as their rise, the Templars have inspired myths, conspiracy theories, and legends for centuries. In this video, we uncover the real story of the Knights Templar, who they were, what they believed, and why their legacy refuses to die. In the aftermath of the First Crusade, as the fervor of Christian conquest still lingered in the Holy Land, a new order emerged from the shadows of history, known as the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, or simply the Knights Templar. This enigmatic brotherhood was founded by 9 French knights, led by Hugh de Payens in 1119. Their stated mission was to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem. A perilous journey fraught with bandits, harsh deserts, and political unrest. However, beneath this noble veneer lay whispers of a deeper purpose, one that would intertwine faith, power, and secrecy in ways that would shape centuries to come. The Templars were not merely warriors, they were monks bound by vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, yet uniquely sanctioned to bear arms. This duality set them apart from other religious orders, granting them an aura of mystique. Their headquarters, established on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, became both a fortress and a symbol of their spiritual devotion. Legends whispered that beneath its sacred stones lay hidden treasures, artifacts of immense significance, perhaps even relics tied to the life of Christ himself. These tales fueled speculation that the Templars' true aim extended beyond safeguarding pilgrims, hinting at a clandestine quest for ancient knowledge or divine relics. As their influence grew, so too did their wealth and connection. Donations poured in from across Europe, transforming the Templars into one of the most powerful economic forces of the medieval world. They innovated banking systems, issued loans, and amassed vast tracts of land, carving out a financial empire that rivaled kingdoms. Yet, this prosperity came at a cost. Suspicion brewed among rival factions, who viewed the Templars' growing power with envy and fear. Accusations of heresy began to circulate, suggesting that their rituals veered into forbidden territory. Despite or perhaps because of their outward piety, questions arose about what truly transpired behind closed doors during their secretive ceremonies. This complex tapestry of ambition, faith, and intrigue forms the foundation of our story. In the chapters ahead, we will delve into the lives of key figures within the Templar ranks, explore the labyrinthine politics of the era, and uncover the secrets that drove the order to unparalleled heights and eventual ruin. From the sun-scorched plains of the Levant to the shadowed corridors of European courts, the tale of the Knights Templar is one of heroism and hubris, loyalty and betrayal, all woven together by threads of mystery that refuse to unravel. In the bustling streets of 12th-century Paris, 2 figures stood poised at the threshold of destiny. Sir Baldwin de Montfort and brother Geoffrey of Clairvaux. Each man bore a burden that would shape the course of their lives and the fate of the Knights Templar. Sir Baldwin, a seasoned knight whose armor gleamed with the scars of countless battles, was driven by a relentless sense of duty. His family had long been patrons of the Templars, and his decision to join the order stemmed from both familial obligation and a deep-seated desire to reclaim honor lost in the chaos of war. For Baldwin, the Templars represented redemption, a chance to serve something greater than himself. Yet, beneath his stoic exterior simmered doubts about whether his past sins could ever truly be absolved. Brother Geoffrey, on the other hand, was a scholar cloaked in humility. Born into modest means, he had risen through the ranks of the Church, earning renown for his intellect and theological acumen. Unlike Baldwin, Geoffrey's motivations were rooted in curiosity rather than penance. Drawn to the Templars by rumors of their hidden archives and esoteric teachings, he sought answers to questions that had haunted him since childhood. What truths lay buried within the sacred texts? Could the Templars hold the key to unlocking mysteries that transcended earthly understanding? But Geoffrey's pursuit of knowledge was not without its perils. His unorthodox ideas and relentless questioning often placed him at odds with the rigid doctrines of the Church, leaving him vulnerable to accusations of heresy. Their paths crossed under strained circumstances. Baldwin, tasked with escorting a convoy of Templar treasures from the Holy Land to Paris, found himself ambushed by mercenaries near the outskirts of the city. Outnumbered and weary, he was on the verge of defeat when Geoffrey intervened, wielding little more than his wits and a concealed blade. Though their initial meeting was marked by suspicion, Baldwin saw Geoffrey as a meddling outsider, while Geoffrey questioned Baldwin's unwavering adherence to martial codes. They soon realized their shared commitment to the Templar cause might outweigh their differences. The alliance between these two men proved pivotal during the siege of Damascus in 1148, a campaign that tested the Templars' resolve and exposed fissures within their ranks. As part of the Second Crusade, Baldwin and Geoffrey were thrust into the heart of a conflict rife with political intrigue and shifting loyalties. While Baldwin commanded troops on the front lines, Geoffrey worked tirelessly behind the scenes, deciphering intercepted messages and negotiating fragile alliances. Together, they uncovered evidence of treachery within the Crusader army, traitors who sought to undermine the Templars' influence by spreading disinformation and sowing discord among the ranks. This discovery forced Baldwin and Geoffrey to confront not only external enemies but also internal strife. The siege ended in failure, a bitter reminder of the fragility of unity among disparate factions vying for control. For Baldwin, it was a humbling lesson in leadership. For Geoffrey, it underscored the dangers of pursuing truth in a world governed by lies. Their bond, forged in the crucible of adversity, became a cornerstone of the Templars' resilience, even as whispers of betrayal continued to haunt their order. As the dust settled over Damascus, Baldwin and Geoffrey returned to Paris, carrying with them both physical wounds and psychological scars. The events of the siege had deepened their understanding of the Templars' precarious position, caught between the demands of faith and the machinations of power. Unbeknownst to them, however, their struggles were only beginning. A shadow loomed on the horizon, one that threatened to unravel everything they had fought to protect. The stage was set for a confrontation that would challenge their loyalty, test their courage, and reveal the true cost of their allegiance to the Knights Templar. Amidst the echoing stone halls of the Templar stronghold in Paris, the air thickened with tension that no prayer could dispel. Rumors of a traitor amongst the ranks had begun to seep through the cracks of the once impervious walls of trust. It was a time of heightened vigilance and paranoia, where every glance exchanged between brothers carried the weight of suspicion, and every whispered conversation was dissected for hidden meanings. The revelation came during a routine inventory check of the Templar treasury. Sir Baldwin de Montfort, meticulous in his duties, noticed discrepancies in the records that suggested embezzlement on a scale that could destabilize the entire order. The sums involved were staggering, and the implications devastating. Someone within their sanctified circle was diverting funds meant for the defense of the Holy Land into unknown hands. Brother Geoffrey of Clairvaux, with his sharp mind attuned to patterns and anomalies, joined Baldwin in the investigation. Together, they traced the irregularities back to a series of encrypted letters intercepted months prior. The cipher used was sophisticated, but Geoffrey's expertise in cryptology allowed them to decode messages that pointed towards a high-ranking Templar official orchestrating the thefts. The identity of this figure sent shockwaves through their hearts. It was none other than Grand Master Bernard de Tremblay, a man revered for his wisdom and leadership. Confronting Bernard required a delicate balance of diplomacy and strategy. Baldwin and Geoffrey knew that accusing a Grand Master without irrefutable proof could lead to their immediate excommunication or worse. They decided to gather evidence secretly, documenting every transaction and interaction linked to Bernard. Their task was arduous, involving sleepless nights and covert meetings in the darkest corners of the fortress. As they delved deeper, the scope of betrayal widened. Not only was Bernard implicated, but several influential members of the council were also involved, weaving a web of deceit that reached into the highest echelons of Templar power. The motive, as it unraveled, was grimly pragmatic. The funds were being funneled to secure political alliances that promised protection against mounting pressures from secular powers and the Church itself, which increasingly viewed the Templars' autonomy as a threat. The climax of their investigation came during a secret conclave called under the guise of discussing strategies for the upcoming military campaigns. Baldwin and Geoffrey unveiled their findings, presenting documents and testimonies that left no room for denial. The chamber erupted in chaos, with accusations flying like arrows in a skirmish. Loyalties were tested, and old friendships crumbled under the weight of revealed betrayals. Bernard, cornered and exposed, argued that his actions were for the greater good, a necessary evil to ensure the survival of the Templars in a rapidly changing world. But his words fell on deaf ears, drowned out by the cries of betrayed brothers demanding justice. In a rare display of unified resolve, the Templar Council stripped Bernard of his title and sentenced him to lifelong imprisonment within the very walls he had once commanded. The aftermath of the betrayal was profound. Trust, once broken, was difficult to mend. The Templars tightened their security protocols and restructured their hierarchy to prevent future corruptions. Yet, the scar of betrayal ran deep, casting long shadows over the Order's future endeavors. Baldwin and Geoffrey, while vindicated, felt the heavy burden of their roles as both accusers and guardians of the Templar legacy. As the chapter closed on this dark episode, the Templars faced a renewed challenge, not from external foes, but from the lingering specter of doubt and division within their own ranks. The road ahead was fraught with uncertainties, but for now, they stood united, ready to face whatever trials awaited them. knowing well that their greatest battles were often fought not with swords, but with the integrity of their souls. In the aftermath of the betrayal, the Knights Templar found themselves navigating a perilous landscape, both externally besieged by adversaries and internally fractured by mistrust. The year 1150 dawned with ominous clouds gathering over the Templar stronghold in Paris, as word spread of a formidable coalition forming against them. King Louis II of France, emboldened by the scandal surrounding former Grand Master Bernard de Tremolay, sought to weaken the Templars' influence within his realm. Meanwhile, Pope Eugene III, wary of the order's growing autonomy, quietly supported Louis's maneuvers, setting the stage for a formidable trial by fire. Sir Baldwin de Montfort, now elevated to the rank of Marshal of the Templars, stood at the forefront of this looming conflict. His reputation as a stalwart warrior and a man of principle had earned him respect, but the weight of leadership pressed heavily upon him. Alongside brother Geoffrey of Clairvaux, Baldwin devised a dual strategy: to fortify their defenses and to counter the propaganda undermining their credibility. They understood that this battle would not be won solely through the clash of swords, but through the art of diplomacy and the strength of their convictions. The first test came swiftly. A contingent of royal troops, ostensibly dispatched to maintain peace, encircled the Templar compound under the guise of protecting it from potential uprisings. Baldwin recognized this move for what it truly was: an attempt to assert dominance and restrict the Templars' movements. With calm authority, he ordered the gates sealed and the battlements manned. Inside, the brothers prepared for a siege, their spirits buoyed by Baldwin's unwavering resolve. Meanwhile, Geoffrey employed his intellectual prowess to craft a response to the accusations levied against the Templars. He penned a series of letters addressed to influential clerics and nobles across Europe, meticulously dismantling the claims of corruption and heresy. Drawing upon historical precedents and theological arguments, Geoffrey painted the Templars as defenders of Christendom, indispensable in the fight against infidels and vital to the stability of the realm. His eloquence swayed many, sowing seeds of doubt in the minds of those who had been quick to condemn. As weeks turned into months, tensions escalated. King Louis, frustrated by the Templars' defiance, imposed sanctions that crippled their financial operations within France. Markets were closed to them, and their properties were subject to arbitrary taxes. Yet, Baldwin and Geoffrey remained undeterred. They activated a network of loyal supporters, including merchants and minor nobility, who smuggled supplies into the fortress and disseminated Geoffrey's writings far and wide. The turning point came during the feast of Saint Raphael. The turning point came during the feast of Saint Michael, a day traditionally marked by displays of martial prowess. Baldwin wooed a grand exhibition of Templar discipline and valor, inviting dignitaries and common folk alike to witness their training and drills. The spectacle served a dual purpose. It demonstrated the Templars' readiness to defend their homeland and showcased their unity despite recent tribulations. The crowd's cheers echoed through the streets of Paris, a testament to the enduring popularity of the Templars among the populace. King Louis, observing the event from a distance, realized that his attempts to isolate the Templars were faltering. Public sentiment, swayed by Geoffrey's writings and Baldwin's show of strength, began to Sensing an opportunity, Baldwin initiated secret negotiations with moderate factions within the royal court, offering assurances of the Templars' loyalty in exchange for leniency. These talks, conducted under the cover of night, eventually bore fruit. The sanctions were lifted, and the encircling troops withdrew. Though the immediate crisis had passed, Baldwin and Geoffrey knew that their victory was tenuous. The scars of betrayal still lingered, and the Templars' relationship with both secular and ecclesiastical authorities remained fraught with tension. Nevertheless, they had emerged stronger, tempered by the fires of adversity. As winter descended upon Paris, the Templars stood united, their resolve hardened like steel. The trials they had endured had forged them anew, preparing them for the challenges that lay ahead in the tumultuous years to come. In the quiet chambers of the Templar library, where the scent of aged parchment mingled with the faint aroma of beeswax candles, Brother Geoffrey of Clairvaux made a discovery that would alter the course of the Templars' destiny. Hidden within a recess of a crumbling manuscript, bound in leather worn smooth by centuries of handling, lay a reference to an artifact of unparalleled significance, the Lance of Longinus. According to legend, this was the spear that pierced the side of Christ during the crucifixion, imbued with divine power and capable of bestowing untold blessings or curses upon its possessor. The implications of such a relic falling into Templar hands were staggering. Geoffrey, whose scholarly pursuits had always leaned toward the mystical and the arcane, felt a surge of both awe and trepidation. The lance could serve as a unifying symbol for the fractured order, restoring faith and morale among the brothers. Yet, it also carried the risk of inflaming jealousies and inviting further scrutiny from those who already viewed the Templars with suspicion. He confided his findings to Sir Baldwin de Montfort, knowing that the decision to pursue the relic would require both wisdom and courage. Baldwin, ever pragmatic, wrestled with the moral and strategic dilemmas posed by Geoffrey's revelation. On one hand, possessing the lance could bolster the Templars' standing as defenders of Christendom, lending credence to their claims of divine favor. On the other hand, the relic's acquisition could provoke accusations of greed or sacrilege, further alienating them from the church and secular powers. After days of deliberation, Baldwin resolved that the potential benefits outweighed the risks. If the Templars were to endure the storms ahead, they needed something greater than mere mortal strength to sustain them. Thus, a clandestine expedition was organized, shrouded in secrecy to avoid drawing undue attention. Baldwin selected a small, trusted group of knights, each chosen for their loyalty and discretion. Among them was Sir Roland of Normandy, a veteran warrior known for his keen instincts and unyielding resolve. Geoffrey accompanied the party, his knowledge of ancient texts and languages proving invaluable in deciphering cryptic clues that led them closer to the lance's rumored resting place. Their journey took them across treacherous terrain, from the snow-capped peaks of the Alps to the sun-scorched plains of the Levant. Along the way, they encountered numerous trials that tested their endurance and faith. Bandits ambushed them in narrow mountain passes, forcing Baldwin to employ his tactical brilliance to outmaneuver the attackers. In remote villages, they faced hostility from locals who viewed the Templars with suspicion, requiring Geoffrey to negotiate safe passage through diplomacy and gifts of coin. The most harrowing challenge came when they reached the ruins of an ancient Byzantine monastery, said to guard the entrance to a hidden crypt where the lance was concealed. The structure, half buried by time and neglect, exuded an eerie aura, its crumbling walls adorned with faded frescoes depicting biblical scenes. As they ventured inside, the air grew colder, and an unsettling silence enveloped them. Geoffrey deciphered inscriptions etched into the stone floor, revealing a series of riddles that unlocked a concealed passageway. Descending into the depths of the earth, The party encountered traps designed to thwart intruders. Pressure plates triggered cascades of stones, and poisoned darts whistled through the air, narrowly missing their targets. Sir Roland distinguished himself in these moments, using his shield to deflect projectiles and his sword to disable mechanisms. His bravery inspired the others, reminding them of the sacred purpose that drove their mission. At last, they reached the inner sanctum, a cavern illuminated by shafts of light filtering through cracks in the ceiling. There, atop a pedestal of black marble, rested the Lance of Longinus. Its blade gleamed faintly, as though imbued with an otherworldly energy. Geoffrey approached cautiously, his hands trembling as he wrapped the relic in a silken cloth. The moment he touched it, a profound stillness settled over the chamber, as if the very air held its breath. Returning to Paris with the lance proved no less perilous. Word of their quest had somehow leaked, drawing the attention of rival factions eager to claim the relic for themselves. A fierce skirmish erupted on the outskirts of the city, where Baldwin's leadership and Roland's valor turned the tide in their favor. Bloodied but triumphant, they brought the lance into the Templar stronghold, where it was enshrined in a specially constructed reliquary. The presence of the lance transformed the Templars' fortunes almost immediately. Pilgrims flocked to the fortress, seeking blessings and miracles, while donations poured in from across Europe. Yet, the relic also cast a long shadow, stirring envy and fear among those who coveted its power. Baldwin and Geoffrey knew that their possession of the lance was both a blessing and a curse, a double-edged sword that would shape the Templars' destiny in ways they could scarcely imagine. As the chapter drew to a close, the Lance of Longinus stood as a symbol of the Templars' resilience and faith, a beacon of hope in a world rife with uncertainty. But it also served as a harbinger of the trials to come, for the forces arrayed against them were gathering strength, determined to wrest the relic from their grasp. The Templars' journey was far from over, and the path ahead promised to be fraught with perils unlike any they had faced before. The acquisition of the Lance of Longinus brought the Knights Templar unprecedented acclaim, but it also cast a long, ominous shadow over their future. Whispers of heresy began to swirl like a tempest around the order, fueled by the relic's mysterious origins and the Templars' growing influence. For centuries, the Church had maintained a delicate balance of power, and the Templars' newfound prominence threatened to upset that equilibrium. Cardinal Arnaud de Périgord, a zealous and ambitious prelate, emerged as the Templars' most vocal adversary. To him, the lance was not a divine gift but a dangerous talisman, a symbol of pride that smacked of idolatry. He saw the Templars' possession of it as an affront to Church's authority, a challenge that could not go unanswered. De Périgord's campaign against the Templars unfolded with calculated precision. He began by rallying support from like-minded clergy, weaving a narrative that painted the order as a rogue faction operating outside the bounds of orthodoxy. Sermons delivered across Europe branded the Templars as heretics who had strayed from the true path of Christianity. Tales of their secretive rituals, already distorted by rumor, were amplified to portray them as practitioners of dark art. De Périgord's rhetoric struck a chord with many, particularly those who envied the Templars' wealth and autonomy. Slowly but surely, public opinion began to turn against the order. Within the Templar ranks, the backlash was met with a mixture of defiance and unease. Sir Baldwin de Montfort, ever the pragmatist, Nines. Sir Baldwin de Montfort, ever the pragmatist, None recognized the gravity of the situation but refused to surrender to fear. He convened a council of senior Templars, including Brother Geoffrey of Clairvaux, to devise a strategy to counter the accusations. Geoffrey, whose intellect had long been the order's greatest asset, proposed a bold plan to engage the Church directly, not through force but through dialogue. He argued that the Templars must demonstrate their piety and loyalty to Christendom, emphasizing their role as protectors of the faith rather than heretical outliers. Baldwin agreed, though he privately harbored doubts about whether reason alone could quell the storm brewing against them. The first salvo in this ideological battle came during a papal synod in Reims, where Cardinal de Périgord presented a formal indictment of the Templars, citing their possession of the lance as evidence of their deviation from orthodox doctrine. He demanded that the order submit to an ecclesiastical inquiry. The Templars, represented by Geoffrey, countered with a meticulously crafted defense, drawing upon scripture and historical precedent. Geoffrey argued that relics had long been venerated by the Church as conduits of divine grace. The lance, he contended, was no different. It was a symbol of Christ's sacrifice, not an object of worship. His eloquence earned grudging admiration from some attendees, but de Périgord's influence ensured that the synod ended in stalemate. Undeterred, de Périgord escalated his campaign. He dispatched inquisitors to Templar strongholds across Europe, ostensibly to investigate allegations of heresy, but in reality to sow discord and gather evidence. The inquisitors' methods were ruthless, relying on intimidation and coercion to extract confessions from frightened Templars. In one particularly egregious case, a young novice named Brother Alain was subjected to hours of relentless interrogation, his resolve crumbling under the weight of psychological torment. When he finally confessed to witnessing blasphemous rites, the testimony was trumpeted as proof of the Templars' guilt. The impact of these accusations reverberated throughout the order. Morale plummeted as brothers grappled with the specter of persecution. Some, shaken by the inquisitors' tactics, began to question whether their faith was enough to withstand such scrutiny. Others, emboldened by Baldwin's leadership, vowed to resist. The ideological rift deepened, threatening to fracture the Templars from within. It was during this period of turmoil that a pivotal confrontation occurred between Baldwin and de Périgord. Summoned to the cardinal's private chambers under the pretense of negotiation, Baldwin found himself face to face with the man who sought to destroy everything he had sworn to protect. De Périgord's demeanor was icy, his words laced with thinly veiled threats. "Your order walks a perilous path," he intoned, his voice dripping with contempt. "Surrender the lance, renounce your arrogance, and perhaps the Church will show mercy." Baldwin's response was measured but unyielding. "The lance is not ours to surrender," he replied. "It belongs to Christendom, just as we do. Accuse us of heresy, if you must, but know this: the Templars will not bow to fear or falsehood." The encounter ended in a stalemate, but its ramifications were far-reaching. De Périgord, enraged by Baldwin's defiance, redoubled his efforts to discredit the Templars. Meanwhile, Baldwin and Geoffrey intensified their efforts to rally support, reaching out to sympathetic bishops and nobles who recognized the value of the Templars' service. Their persistence began to yield results, as pockets of resistance to de Périgord's crusade emerged across Europe. Yet, the ideological battle was far from over. The Church's stance on relics and orthodoxy remained a contentious issue. and the Templars' possession of the lance continued to polarize opinion. For every ally they gained, another enemy rose to oppose them. The struggle for legitimacy became a war of attrition, testing the Templars' resolve and challenging their very identity. As the chapter drew to a close, the Templars stood at a crossroads. The Templars stood at a crossroads. The Lance of Longinus, once a source of hope and unity, had become a lightning rod for controversy. The ideological rift between the order and its detractors showed no signs of healing, and the specter of persecution loomed larger than ever. Baldwin and Geoffrey knew that the coming months would determine not only the fate of the Templars but also the future of their faith. The battle for hearts and minds was theirs to win or lose. The winds of war swept across the Mediterranean, carrying with them the scent of salt and impending doom. By 1187, the Kingdom of Jerusalem teetered on the brink of collapse, its fragile peace shattered by the rise of Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt and Syria. His forces, disciplined and fiercely loyal, had already claimed key territories, and now they set their sights on the coastal stronghold of Acre, a linchpin of Christian control in the Levant. For the Knights Templar, the siege of Acre was not merely a battle for land, but a desperate bid to preserve the remnants of their order's power and prestige in the Holy Land. Sir Baldwin de Montfort, now a seasoned commander, stood atop the battered ramparts of Acre's citadel, surveying the sprawling army encamped beyond the city walls. Tens of thousands of Saracen warriors stretched as far as the eye could see, their banners fluttering in the sea breeze. Behind him, the city brimmed with refugees, soldiers, and Templar knights, all united by a shared determination to hold the line. Baldwin's mind raced with strategies, his thoughts punctuated by the distant thud of siege engines pounding the outer defenses. Time was running out. Brother Geoffrey of Clairvaux, ever the strategist, worked tirelessly alongside Baldwin to coordinate the defense. His knowledge of ancient fortifications and siege tactics proved invaluable as they fortified the city's weakest points and stockpiled supplies. Yet, Geoffrey's contributions extended beyond logistics. He walked among the defenders, offering words of encouragement and prayers for strength, his calm demeanor a balm to frayed nerves. The Templars' leadership, a blend of Baldwin's martial prowess and Geoffrey's intellectual acumen, galvanized the garrison, instilling a sense of purpose that transcended fear. The siege began with a ferocity that left no room for respite. Saladin's catapults hurled massive stones at the walls, reducing towers to rubble and creating breaches that his infantry sought to exploit. The Templars, clad in their white mantles emblazoned with the Crimson Cross, fought with unmatched zeal, repelling wave after wave of attackers. Baldwin personally led countercharges, his sword flashing in the sunlight as he cut down enemy soldiers attempting to scale the walls. His presence on the battlefield inspired his men, who followed him with unwavering loyalty. But the Templars' valor alone could not stem the tide. Saladin's forces were relentless, employing tactics honed through years of warfare. They dug trenches to undermine the walls, launched flaming projectiles to ignite buildings within the city, and deployed elite units to exploit any weakness. The defenders suffered heavy losses, their ranks thinning with each passing day. Supplies dwindled, and disease began to spread among the crowded inhabitants. Morale wavered, and whispers of surrender crept through the streets. It was then that Baldwin and Geoffrey unveiled their boldest gamble yet. Under the cover of darkness, they organized a daring sortie, a nighttime raid designed to disrupt the enemy's siege engines and buy precious time. Leading a small detachment of Templar knights, Baldwin slipped through a hidden postern gate, his movements guided by Geoffrey's meticulous planning. The sortie caught the Saracens off guard, plunging their camp into chaos. Baldwin and his men torched siege towers, destroyed trebuchets, and sowed confusion before retreating back to the safety of the city walls. The operation was a success, temporarily halting Saladin's advance and bolstering the defenders' spirits. However, the reprieve was short-lived. Saladin, enraged by the audacity of the Templars, redoubled his efforts. Reinforcements arrived, swelling his ranks and intensifying the pressure on Acre. The city's defenders, exhausted and outnumbered, clung to hope as rumors of a relief force from Europe began to circulate. Yet, the promised aid seemed agonizingly slow to materialize. Days turned into weeks, and the siege dragged on, each sunrise bringing fresh horrors. Amid the carnage, and moments of extraordinary heroism emerged. Sir Roland of Normandy, who had distinguished himself during the quest for the Lance of Longinus, performed feats that would be immortalized in Templar lore. Stationed at a critical breach in the wall, he single-handedly held off a swarm of attackers. His shield splintered and his armor bloodied. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found Roland standing amidst a sea of fallen foes, his sword embedded in the ground as he leaned against the ruined masonry. Gasping for breath, his defiance became a rallying cry for the defenders, a testament to the indomitable spirit of the Templars. As the siege entered its final phase, the situation grew dire. Hunger gnawed at the defenders, and despair clawed at their resolve. Yet, Baldwin and Geoffrey refused to yield. They organized nightly vigils, where Templars and civilians alike gathered to pray for deliverance. Geoffrey's sermons, delivered with quiet conviction, reminded them of their sacred duty to protect the Holy Land. "We are not merely fighting for Acre," he declared, his voice steady despite the exhaustion etched into his face. "We fight for the soul of Christendom itself." Finally, after nearly 2 years of relentless struggle, the long-awaited relief force arrived. A coalition of crusaders from across Europe, led by King Guy of Jerusalem and Richard the Lionheart. Their arrival turned the tide, forcing Saladin to withdraw and lifting the siege. The city of Acre, though battered and scarred, remained in Christian hands. The Templars, battered but unbroken, emerged as heroes of the conflict, their sacrifices ensuring the survival of the kingdom. Yet, the victory was bittersweet. The siege had exacted a heavy toll, both in lives lost and in the strain it placed on the Templars' resources. Baldwin and Geoffrey stood amidst the ruins of Acre, their faces lined with fatigue but their eyes alight with resolve. The battle had tested them in ways they could never have imagined, forging bonds of camaraderie and exposing vulnerabilities they could no longer ignore. As they surveyed the devastation, they knew that the Templars' struggles were far from over. The siege of Acre had been a crucible, and though they had emerged victorious, the flames of conflict continued to burn, threatening to consume them all. The triumph at Acre, hard-won and costly, cast a long shadow over the Knights Templar. While the city remained in Christian hands, the scars of the siege ran deep, etching lines of weariness into the faces of those who had endured its horrors. Sir Baldwin de Montfort and brother Geoffrey of Clairvaux stood amidst the ruins, their bodies battered but their spirits unbroken. Yet, the victory they had sacrificed so much to achieve carried with it a burden that neither could have anticipated, a burden that would test the very foundations of their order. The immediate aftermath of the siege was a blur of activity. Wounded Templars were tended to by makeshift infirmaries, their groans mingling with the sounds of reconstruction. Refugees streamed out of the city, eager to leave behind the memories of starvation and death, while supplies from the Crusader fleet trickled in to replenish depleted stores. Baldwin, his armor still caked with dried blood, oversaw the distribution of food and medical care, his leadership unwavering despite the toll the siege had taken on him. Geoffrey, meanwhile, moved among the survivors, offering solace and prayers, his presence a quiet anchor in the chaos. Yet, beneath the surface of relief and gratitude, fissures began to emerge. The prolonged siege had drained the Templars' coffers, leaving them perilously low on resources. Ships laden with gold and provisions had been diverted elsewhere by opportunistic nobles, who saw the Templars' weakened state as an opportunity to consolidate their own power. Donations from Europe, once a steady stream, slowed to a trickle as rumors spread of the order's diminished influence. The financial strain was compounded by the need to rebuild Acre's defenses, a task that required not only manpower but also significant investment. Baldwin and Geoffrey found themselves grappling with a question that had haunted the Templars since their inception. How could they sustain their mission without compromising their principles? The answer, when it came, was as controversial as it was pragmatic. Baldwin proposed a radical solution: to expand the Templars' banking operations, leveraging their reputation as stewards of wealth to secure loans and investments from European monarchs and merchants. The idea was met with resistance from within the order. Many Templars viewed banking as a secular pursuit, antithetical to their vow of poverty. Geoffrey, however, saw merit in the plan. Drawing on his extensive knowledge of economics and theology, he argued that the Templars' financial activities could be framed as a form of service to Christendom, enabling them to fund their defense of the Holy Land while maintaining their spiritual integrity. His eloquence swayed some, but dissent simmered beneath the surface. The implementation of Baldwin's plan required delicate diplomacy. He dispatched emissaries to key allies across Europe, seeking pledges of support in exchange for favorable terms on loans and trade agreements. Geoffrey accompanied one such mission to England, where they negotiated with King Richard the Lionheart. Richard, impressed by the Templars' resilience and strategic acumen, agreed to extend substantial financial backing, provided the order pledged its support in future campaigns. The deal was struck, but it came with strings attached, strings that bound the Templars ever more tightly to the whims of secular powers. Back in Acre, the influx of funds began to stabilize the situation, allowing the Templars to repair the city's defenses and replenish their ranks. Yet, the compromises they had made weighed heavily on Baldwin and Geoffrey. They had always prided themselves on the Templars' independence, their ability to act as a bulwark against both temporal and spiritual corruption. Now, they found themselves beholden to kings and merchants, their autonomy eroded by the very alliances they had forged to survive. The internal divisions within the order deepened as debates over their role in the world intensified. Younger Templars, emboldened by the siege's lessons, advocated for a more aggressive approach to defending the Holy Land, arguing that military might was the only way to secure their future. Older members, scarred by the siege's brutality, urged caution, warning that overreach could lead to their downfall. Baldwin, torn between these factions, struggled to maintain unity. Geoffrey, ever the mediator, sought to bridge the gap, reminding them that their strength lay not in division but in their shared commitment to their vows. Amid these tensions, a new threat emerged, one that would force the Templars to confront the limits of their power. Reports reached Acre of a resurgence in Saracen activity along the coast, with Saladin's forces regrouping and launching raids on smaller Christian settlements. The Templars, stretched thin by their obligations in Acre, were ill-equipped to respond effectively. Baldwin and Geoffrey faced a daunting choice: to withdraw forces from Acre to protect the hinterlands, or to consolidate their position in the city and risk losing the broader region. The decision was agonizing, pitting their duty to the people against their responsibility to the kingdom. Ultimately, Baldwin chose to reinforce the outlying settlements, sending detachments of Templar knights to patrol the countryside and deter further incursions. It was a risky move, leaving Acre vulnerable to renewed attack, but one he believed was necessary to uphold the Templars' mission. Geoffrey supported the decision, though privately he feared it would expose their weaknesses to their enemies. The gambit paid off, at least in the short term, as the Saracen raids subsided, buying the Templars precious time to regroup. Yet, the victories they achieved came at a cost. The Templars' sacrifices in Acre and beyond had earned them admiration, but they had also left them exposed, their vulnerabilities laid bare for all to see. Baldwin and Geoffrey knew that the Order's survival depended not only on their ability to adapt, but also on their capacity to inspire loyalty among their brothers. The weight of leadership pressed heavily upon them, a constant reminder of the price of their choices. As the chapter drew to a close, Baldwin and Geoffrey stood once more atop the rebuilt walls of Acre, gazing out at the horizon. The sun dipped below the sea, casting the city in hues of gold and crimson. For a fleeting moment, the scars of war seemed to fade, replaced by a fragile sense of peace. But the shadows lingered, whispering of challenges yet to come. The Templars had weathered the storm, but the tempest was far from over. Their journey was a testament to resilience, but it was also a reckoning, a reminder that victory, no matter how hard fought, carries its own burdens. The fractures within the Knights Templar, once subtle hairline cracks, had grown into chasms that threatened to cleave the Order in two. The aftermath of the siege of Acre had left the Templars not only physically depleted but spiritually divided. The younger generation of knights, emboldened by their experiences on the battlefield, championed a vision of the Templars as an unstoppable military force, a vanguard of Christendom, destined to reclaim the Holy Land through sheer might. They dismissed the cautious counsel of their elders, who warned that unchecked aggression would only hasten their downfall. These ideological differences simmered beneath the surface, but as tensions mounted, they erupted into open conflict during a council convened to determine the Templars' next course of action. The meeting took place in the Grand Hall of the Templar stronghold in Acre, its vaulted ceiling adorned with faded frescoes depicting scenes of triumph and martyrdom. The air was thick with the weight of unspoken grievances, each knight seated at the long oak table harboring doubts about the path forward. Sir Baldwin de Montfort presided over the gathering, his weathered face betraying the toll of leadership. To his right sat brother Geoffrey of Clairvaux, ever the voice of reason, while across from them were the younger knights, led by Sir Roland of Normandy, whose fiery rhetoric had begun to sway many within the ranks. Roland rose to speak first, his voice ringing with conviction. "We have bled for this land, sacrificed everything to hold it against the infidels," he declared, his fist slamming onto the table for emphasis. "Yet we cower behind walls, waiting for the enemy to strike again. It is time we take the fight to Saladin's forces, to strike fear into their hearts as they have struck fear into ours. The Lance of Longinus is not a relic to be hidden. It is a weapon, a symbol of divine favor that demands action." His words ignited a murmur of agreement among the younger knights, their eyes alight with the promise of glory. But before the sentiment could take hold, an elder knight named Sir Relic of Provence stood to counter. His voice was calm but firm, carrying the authority of decades spent in service to the order. "Glory fades, young Roland," he said, fixing the younger man with a steely gaze. "I have seen too many brave men fall chasing dreams of conquest. Our strength lies not in reckless aggression but in discipline, in knowing when to strike and when to hold. If we throw ourselves blindly into battle, we risk losing everything we have fought to protect." The room erupted into heated debate, voices overlapping in a cacophony of passion and dissent. Some argued for immediate campaigns to reclaim lost territories, while others urged restraint, advocating for fortification and diplomacy. Baldwin watched silently, his expression unreadable. As the arguments swirled around him, he knew that the decision he made would shape the future of the order, and perhaps seal its fate. Geoffrey, sensing the growing rift, interjected with a plea for unity. "Brothers," he began, his tone measured yet urgent, "we are not enemies here. We share the same vows, the same purpose. Let us not allow division to weaken us further. The Lance of Longinus is indeed a gift, but it is also a test, a reminder that true power lies in wisdom, not brute force." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "Our strength has always been our unity. Without it, we are nothing." Though his appeal momentarily quieted the room, the underlying tensions remained unresolved. The younger knights, emboldened by Roland's charisma, began to coalesce around a more militant agenda, while the elders dug in their heels, refusing to abandon caution. The schism deepened, manifesting in subtle ways: separate training sessions, whispered conversations in shadowed corridors, and increasingly strained interactions during communal meals. Baldwin recognized that the ideological divide was not merely a matter of strategy, but of identity. For the younger generation, the Templars represented an unyielding crusade against evil, a mission that brooked no compromise. For the elders, the order was a sacred institution, bound by vows of humility and service, its role as much spiritual as martial. Bridging this gap seemed impossible. Yet Baldwin understood that failing to do so would doom the Templars to internal collapse. In a desperate bid to mend the fracture, Baldwin proposed a compromise, a dual-pronged approach that combined defensive fortification with limited offensive operations. The plan involved reinforcing key strongholds along the coast while launching targeted raids to disrupt Saracen supply lines and morale. It was a calculated risk, designed to satisfy both factions without overextending their resources. Geoffrey supported the proposal, arguing that it balanced prudence with boldness, though he privately feared it might only delay the inevitable clash. The council ultimately approved Baldwin's plan, though the vote revealed the depth of the division. The younger knights agreed reluctantly, their enthusiasm tempered by frustration, while the elders expressed cautious optimism, wary of the risks inherent in even limited offensives. As the meeting adjourned, Baldwin caught Roland's eye, noting the flicker of defiance in the younger man's gaze. He knew that the truce was fragile at best, held together by little more than shared desperation. Over the following weeks, the Templars implemented their strategy with mixed success. The defensive measures bolstered their positions, earning praise from local lords and merchants who relied on the Templars for protection. However, the raids proved contentious. While some achieved their objectives, disrupting enemy operations and boosting morale among the troops, others ended in costly failures, fueling criticism from both sides. The younger knights accused the elders of undercommitting to the offensive, while the elders blamed youthful recklessness for unnecessary losses. The tipping point came during a raid on a Saracen caravan suspected of carrying supplies destined for Saladin's army. Led by Roland, the operation initially went according to plan, with the Templars ambushing the convoy and securing valuable provisions. But as they prepared to withdraw, reinforcements arrived unexpectedly, outnumbering the Templar detachment. What followed was a chaotic retreat, marked by fierce hand-to-hand combat and significant casualties. Among the fallen was Sir Relic of Provence, mortally wounded while covering the withdrawal of his comrades. Alaric's death sent shockwaves through the order. To the elders, it was a grim vindication of their warnings. To the younger knights, it was a rallying cry, proof that hesitation only invited disaster. The funeral rites were somber, attended by Templars from both factions, yet the atmosphere was charged with unspoken recriminations. Baldwin delivered the eulogy, his voice heavy with sorrow and regret. Sir Alaric gave his life for the cause we all serve, he intoned. Let his sacrifice remind us of what binds us together, not our differences, but our shared commitment to something greater than ourselves. But the words rang hollow to many. In the days that followed, the schism widened, with accusations and counter-accusations poisoning the air. Roland openly challenged Baldwin's leadership, questioning whether a man who sought compromise could truly lead warriors called to fight for God's glory. Others rallied to Baldwin's defense, accusing Roland of insubordination and arrogance. The once unified brotherhood teetered on the brink of outright rebellion. It was Geoffrey who intervened, summoning both factions to a private meeting in the chapel. Lit only by flickering candlelight, the space exuded an aura of solemnity, the crucifix above the altar casting long shadows across the stone floor. Geoffrey addressed them not as a scholar or strategist, but as a brother in faith. This is not how we honor those who have fallen, he said, his voice low but steady. If we turn on one another, then Alaric's death will have been in vain. Remember why you took your vows: to serve, to protect, to uphold the ideals of Christendom, not to destroy yourselves from within. His words struck a chord. If only briefly, both sides agreed to a temporary ceasefire, pledging to focus on external threats rather than internal strife. Yet, the damage had been done. The Templars' unity, once their greatest strength, had been irrevocably weakened. As they returned to their duties, the specter of division loomed large, a harbinger of challenges that would test the Order's very survival. As the chapter closed, Baldwin and Geoffrey stood together in the chapel, their reflections illuminated by the soft glow of candles. They knew that the road ahead would be fraught with peril, not only from external foes but from the fractures within. The Templars had endured much, but the true measure of their resilience lay not in their ability to conquer, but in their capacity to endure, to stand united even when the bonds between them seemed ready to break. The fragile peace brokered in the wake of Sir Alaric's death proved to be little more than a veneer masking deeper turmoil. Though outwardly the Templars resumed their dual-pronged strategy of fortification and limited offensives, the fissures within their ranks continued to widen, threatening to shatter the Order entirely. Sir Baldwin de Montfort and brother Geoffrey of Clairvaux worked tirelessly to maintain cohesion, but whispers of discontent grew louder, fanned by unseen hands. It was during one such moment of tension that a discovery emerged, one so shocking that it threatened to unravel everything the Templars had fought to preserve. The revelation came unexpectedly, cloaked in the mundane routine of daily life within the fortress. Geoffrey, poring over correspondence in the scriptorium, stumbled upon a letter that bore no official seal or insignia. At first glance, it appeared innocuous, a merchant's query regarding trade routes, but something about the phrasing caught his attention. The language was deliberately vague, yet certain coded phrases hinted at a clandestine exchange. Intrigued, Geoffrey meticulously decoded the message, uncovering a web of betrayal that extended far beyond the confines of the Templar stronghold. The letter implicated several high-ranking Templars, including Sir Roland of Normandy, in a secret alliance with agents loyal to King Philip II of France. These agents, operating under the guise of mercenaries and traitors, had been feeding information to the French crown about the Templars' movements, strategies, and vulnerabilities. Worse still, the correspondence suggested that this betrayal was not recent, but had been ongoing for months, if not longer. The implications were staggering. Every tactical decision made by the Templars, every raid launched, every stronghold fortified, had potentially been compromised. Geoffrey's blood ran cold as he pieced together the scope of the treachery. The timing of the Saracen reinforcements during the disastrous caravan raid, which had cost Alaric his life, now seemed less coincidental and more calculated. Had Roland knowingly led his men into a trap? Was the schism within the Order itself orchestrated to distract from this larger conspiracy? The questions gnawed at Geoffrey, demanding answers that could tear the Templars apart. Summoning Baldwin to the scriptorium, Geoffrey revealed his findings, spreading the incriminating documents across the table. Baldwin's face darkened as he read, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the desk. The betrayal cut deeply, not only because it endangered the Order, but because it came from within their own ranks. Roland, once a trusted comrade, had become a Judas figure, his actions driven by motives that remained unclear. Was it ambition, greed, or something darker? "This changes everything," Baldwin growled, his voice barely above a whisper. "If Roland has betrayed us, then trust itself is a lie. Geoffrey nodded gravely. We cannot confront him openly. Not yet. If word spreads prematurely, it could ignite chaos. We must gather evidence. Ensure we understand the full extent of the betrayal before we act. Their investigation unfolded with painstaking precision. Baldwin tasked a small, loyal group of knights with discreetly monitoring Roland and his closest allies, while Geoffrey delved deeper into intercepted communications and financial records. Each new piece of evidence painted a grimmer picture. Roland had not acted alone. He was part of a broader network of Templars who had grown disillusioned with the Order's direction. They believed that aligning with secular powers like King Philip offered a path to greater influence and security, even if it meant sacrificing their independence. The culmination of their efforts came during a covert meeting held in the dead of night. Baldwin and Geoffrey, accompanied by a handful of trusted brothers, intercepted Roland and his co-conspirators as they exchanged encrypted messages with a French emissary. The confrontation was tense, the air crackling with barely suppressed rage. Roland, caught red-handed, attempted to justify his actions, claiming that he sought only to secure the Templars' future in a world where their autonomy was increasingly under threat. You think betrayal is salvation? Baldwin thundered, his voice echoing through the chamber. You've sold your soul for promises of power, and in doing so, you've endangered every man who wears this mantle. Roland's response was defiant, tinged with bitterness. And what have your principles gained us, Baldwin? Losses on the battlefield, dwindling coffers, and a fractured brotherhood? The world has changed, and clinging to outdated ideals will destroy us faster than any enemy. The argument devolved into a heated exchange, with accusations flying like arrows. Geoffrey intervened, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the storm of emotions swirling around him. This is not the way, he said firmly. Whatever your grievances, whatever your fears, this path leads only to ruin for you, for the Order, and for everything we have sworn to protect. Ultimately, the conspirators were detained, their roles documented and their confessions recorded. The decision of how to proceed weighed heavily on Baldwin and Geoffrey. Executing Roland and his allies would send a clear message but risk alienating those who sympathized with their grievances. Banishing them, however, left the door open for further betrayal. After much deliberation, they settled on a compromise. The conspirators would be stripped of their titles and confined to monastic penance within the fortress. Their movements closely monitored. Their crimes would be kept secret, known only to a select few, to prevent panic and preserve the semblance of unity. Yet, the damage had already been done. News of the betrayal, though suppressed, seeped into the collective consciousness of the Order. Trust, once broken, was difficult to rebuild. Knights eyed one another with suspicion, questioning loyalties and motives. The younger faction, already disillusioned, grew restless, their frustrations boiling over into acts of insubordination. The elders, shaken by the revelation, doubled down on their calls for caution, further entrenching the divide. For Baldwin and Geoffrey, the betrayal was a bitter lesson in the fragility of loyalty. They had devoted their lives to the Templars, believing in the sanctity of their vows and the righteousness of their cause. Yet, faced with the reality of human frailty, they were forced to confront uncomfortable truths, that even the most devout could falter, that ideals could be corrupted, and that the line between ally and adversary was often perilously thin. As the chapter drew to a close, Baldwin stood atop the fortress walls, gazing out at the horizon. The sun dipped below the sea, casting long shadows across the city of Acre. Beside him, Geoffrey joined in silent contemplation. The weight of leadership pressed heavily upon them, a constant reminder of the price of their choices. The Templars had survived the siege of Acre, the schism within their ranks, and now the sting of betrayal. But the trials they faced were far from over. The road ahead promised to be fraught with perils, both external and internal, testing their resolve and challenging their very identity. "We cannot undo what has been done," Geoffrey murmured finally, breaking the silence, "but we can choose how we move forward." Baldwin nodded, his jaw tightening with determination. "Then let us choose wisely, for the sake of the order, and for the souls of those who follow us." The Templars' journey was far from complete, but one thing was certain: the battles they fought were no longer solely against external foes. The greatest challenge lay within, the struggle to reconcile their ideals with the complexities of human nature, to rebuild trust amidst betrayal, and to forge a path forward when the foundations of their world had been shaken to the core. The year was 1291, and the winds of change swept mercilessly across the Holy Land. The Mamluks, a formidable force under the command of Sultan al-Ashraf Khalil, had set their sights on the last bastion of Christian resistance, the city of Acre. For the Knights Templar, this was not merely another battle. It was the culmination of decades of struggle, sacrifice, and survival. The stakes were existential, for if Acre fell, so too would the Templars' foothold in the Levant, leaving their mission incomplete and their legacy tarnished. Sir Baldwin de Montfort, now aged and battle-worn, stood once more atop the city's ramparts, his piercing gaze fixed on the horizon. The Mamluk army stretched endlessly before him, a tide of steel and banners that dwarfed anything he had faced before. Behind him, the city buzzed with activity: knights donning armor, blacksmiths hammering swords, and civilians preparing for the worst. Baldwin's heart ached with the weight of responsibility, but his resolve remained unshaken. This was their final stand, and he would see it through to the end. Brother Geoffrey of Clairvaux moved among the defenders, offering prayers and counsel. Though his body bore the marks of age, his spirit burned with the fervor of youth. He carried with him the Lance of Longinus, now wrapped in silken cloth and secured within a reliquary. Its presence was a beacon of hope, a reminder of the divine purpose that had guided the Templars through countless trials. Yet, even Geoffrey could not deny the gravity of their situation. The odds were insurmountable, and the outcome all but certain. Still, he reminded himself and those around him that courage was not the absence of fear but the triumph over it. The siege began with a ferocity that left no room for respite. The Mamluks unleashed a barrage of artillery, their massive trebuchets hurling stones and firepots at the city's walls. Towers crumbled under the relentless assault, and breaches began to form, exposing the defenders to waves of infantry. Baldwin led countercharges with unmatched valor, his sword flashing in the sunlight as he rallied his men. Despite the overwhelming numbers arrayed against them, the Templars fought with a tenacity born of desperation. Each knight knew that this was their last chance to defend the Holy Land, and they refused to yield. Among the defenders, Sir Roland of Normandy emerged as an unexpected hero, Though stripped of his rank and confined to monastic penance after his betrayal, Roland had been granted a chance at redemption. Though stripped of his rank and confined to monastic penance after his betrayal, Roland had been granted a chance at redemption. "Let me prove my worth," he had told Baldwin, his voice steady. "If I am to die, let it be for something greater than myself." Roland's transformation was remarkable. He fought alongside the Templars with a ferocity that inspired those around him, his blade cutting a swath through the enemy ranks. At one critical juncture, he single-handedly held a breach long enough for reinforcements to arrive, his body battered but unbroken. Baldwin, watching from afar, felt a pang of pride mingled with sorrow. Whatever Roland's past transgressions, his actions in these final hours redeemed him in the eyes of his brothers. As the siege dragged on, the defenders' position grew increasingly dire. Supplies dwindled, and exhaustion took its toll. The Mamluks, sensing victory, intensified their attacks, pouring through breaches in the walls and engaging the Templars in brutal street-to-street combat. Baldwin and Geoffrey coordinated the defense, retreating strategically to consolidate their forces within the inner citadel. Every step backward was a painful concession, but they knew that holding the citadel was their only hope of prolonging the fight. Amid the chaos, moments of extraordinary heroism emerged. One such moment occurred when a group of Templar knights, led by Sir Alan of Burgundy, executed a daring sortie to destroy a Mamluk siege tower that threatened to breach the citadel's gates. Outnumbered and surrounded, they fought with a desperation that bordered on madness, their cries of "Dace Vault" echoing through the narrow streets. Though none survived, their sacrifice bought precious time, allowing the defenders to reinforce the gates and repel the attackers. Yet, despite these acts of valor, the end drew inexorably closer. On the third day of the siege, the Mamluks breached the citadel's outer walls, flooding into the courtyard. Baldwin, his armor dented and bloodied, led a final charge, his voice hoarse from shouting commands. Around him, Templars formed a tight circle, their swords raised in defiance. Geoffrey stood at the center, clutching the Lance of Longinus, his lips moving in silent prayer. The clash was swift and brutal, the Templars cutting down scores of enemies before being overwhelmed. In the final moments, Baldwin found himself face to face with Sultan al-Ashraf Khalil. The two men locked eyes, their blades clashing in a flurry of steel. Baldwin fought with the strength of a man who had nothing left to lose, but age and fatigue betrayed him. With a deft strike, the Sultan disarmed him, sending his sword clattering to the ground. Baldwin dropped to one knee, his chest heaving, and looked up at his foe. "Finish it," he rasped, his voice devoid of fear. "But know this, the Templars may fall, but our spirit will endure." Khalil hesitated, studying the old knight with a mixture of respect and pity. Then, with a swift motion, he drove his blade through Baldwin's heart. The Grand Marshal of the Templars slumped to the ground, his eyes closing for the final time. Geoffrey, witnessing Baldwin's death, tightened his grip on the lance. Surrounded by Mamluk soldiers, he raised the relic above his head, his voice ringing out with surprising clarity. "This is not the end," he cried. "The Templars may perish, but our mission lives on. The light of Christendom will never be extinguished." Before the soldiers could seize him, Geoffrey plunged the lance into the earth, shattering the reliquary. A blinding flash of light erupted, forcing the attackers to shield their eyes. When the glare subsided, Geoffrey was gone, vanished without a trace. The Mamluks searched frantically but found no sign of him, leaving them to wonder if divine intervention had spared the last Templar scholar. By nightfall, the city of Acre lay in ruins, its streets littered with the bodies of defenders and attackers alike. The Templars' stronghold was overrun, their banners torn down and replaced with those of the Mamluks. Yet, even as the victors celebrated, a sense of unease lingered. The Templars had fought to the bitter end, their courage and sacrifice etched into the annals of history. Though defeated, they had left an indelible mark, a testament to the enduring power of faith, loyalty, and resilience. As the chapter closed, the surviving Templars, those who had escaped the slaughter, gathered in secret, vowing to carry on the Order's legacy. They knew that their mission was far from over, that the ideals for which Baldwin and Geoffrey had given their lives would continue to inspire generations to come. The fall of Acre was not an ending but a beginning, a call to rise from the ashes and forge a new path in a changing world. In the aftermath of Acre's fall, the scattered remnants of the Knights Templar regrouped in the shadows, their once mighty banners reduced to whispered legends. The survivors, fewer than 100, gathered in the dimly lit crypt of a remote priory in southern France, their faces etched with grief and determination. Among them was Sir Roland of Normandy, whose redemption on the battlefield had earned him a measure of forgiveness from his brothers. Though haunted by the memory of his betrayal, Roland now stood as a symbol of resilience, his voice steady as he addressed the assembly. "We are the last," he began, his words resonating through the stone chamber. "The last bearers of a legacy that cannot be allowed to fade. Baldwin and Geoffrey gave their lives so that we might live not for ourselves, but for the ideals they embodied. Faith, honor, sacrifice. These are the flames we must keep burning, even in the darkest of times." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the gathered knights. Each man present carried the scars of Acre, both physical and emotional, but they also carried something else, the unyielding belief that their mission was not yet complete. Brother Thomas of Chartres, a scholar who had served alongside Geoffrey, stepped forward, clutching a fragment of parchment salvaged from the shattered reliquary of the Lance of Longinus. The relic itself was lost, but the parchment bore an inscription that Geoffrey had transcribed years earlier, a passage attributed to the Apostle Paul. "Though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains, and have not love, I am nothing." "These words," Thomas said, his voice trembling with emotion, "are our guiding star. Baldwin and Geoffrey taught us that the Templars were never defined by their wealth, their relics, or even their victories. They were defined by their devotion to something greater than themselves. Love for God, love for humanity, love for the truth. That is what we must carry forward." The decision was made to dissolve the traditional structure of the order, dispersing its members to work quietly among the people, spreading their teachings without drawing the ire of kings or popes. Some chose to join monastic communities, embedding themselves within the church while preserving the Templars' esoteric knowledge. Others became wandering knights, offering protection to pilgrims and the vulnerable, their white mantles replaced with humble cloaks to avoid detection. A select few, including Roland and Thomas, formed a clandestine network dedicated to safeguarding the Order's secrets and ensuring that its ideals endured. Years passed, and the Templars' public memory faded into myth. Yet, their influence persisted, woven subtly into the fabric of European society. The banking systems they had pioneered evolved into the foundations of modern finance, their innovations credited to anonymous benefactors. Tales of their bravery inspired countless works of literature and art, perpetuating their image as paragons of virtue and courage. Even the Lance of Longinus, though lost to history, became a symbol of divine providence, its story passed down through generations as a reminder of the Templars' unwavering faith. Roland, now an old man, spent his final years in solitude, penning a chronicle of the Templars' rise and fall. His writings, preserved in cipher to protect their contents, detailed not only the order's triumphs and tragedies but also its enduring philosophy. He emphasized that the Templars' true legacy lay not in their military prowess or material wealth, but in their commitment to serving a higher purpose. "We were never meant to rule," he wrote. "We were meant to inspire, to be a light in the darkness, a shield for the weak, and a voice for the voiceless." Thomas, meanwhile, dedicated his life to education, establishing a series of schools where children of all backgrounds could learn the virtues of compassion, integrity, and perseverance. His curriculum drew heavily from the Templars' code of conduct, adapted to fit a secular context. Though he never explicitly mentioned the order, those who studied under him recognized the echoes of its teachings in his lessons. "Faith without action is empty," he often told his students. "True strength lies not in the sword but in the heart." As the centuries unfolded, the Templars' legacy continued to evolve, adapting to the needs of each era, while remaining rooted in its core principles. During the Renaissance, their ideals influenced the burgeoning field of humanism, inspiring thinkers to explore the intersection of faith and reason. In the Enlightenment, their emphasis on justice and equality resonated with revolutionaries seeking to dismantle oppressive systems. Even in the modern age, their story served as a reminder of the power of unity and the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity. The final scene of the tale takes place in a modest library in Paris, centuries after the fall of Acre. Centuries after the fall of Acre. A young historian, poring over ancient manuscripts, stumbles upon Roland's chronicle. As she deciphers the cipher, her eyes widen with awe at the revelations contained within. She realizes that the Templars were not merely a relic of the past, but a living tradition, their spirit alive in the countless individuals who had been touched by their example. Closing the book, she gazes out the window at the bustling city beyond. The world had changed immeasurably since the Templars' heyday, yet their legacy endured, a testament to the enduring power of faith, courage, and love. The flame they had kindled so long ago still burned brightly, illuminating the path for those who dared to dream of a better future. And so, the story of the Knights Templar comes full circle, not as an ending, but as a continuation. Their name may have faded from the annals of power, but their essence lives on, carried forward by those who believe in the possibility of a brighter tomorrow. For as long as there are hearts willing to fight for justice, minds eager to seek truth, and souls yearning for connection, the Templars' eternal flame will never be extinguished. The young historian, her heart racing with the weight of her discovery, felt an unexpected kinship with the Knights Templar. Though separated by centuries, She recognized in their story a reflection of her own struggles and aspirations. The world outside her window was vastly different from the medieval landscapes where the Templars had fought and bled. Yet the challenges they faced, corruption, division, the tension between idealism and pragmatism felt eerily familiar. She realized that the Templars' legacy was not confined to history books or dusty manuscripts. It lived in the choices people made every day, in the quiet acts of courage and compassion that shaped the course of human events. Her mind turned to the inscription on the fragment of parchment Roland had preserved, "Though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains, and have not love, I am nothing." These words resonated deeply with her, offering clarity amid the chaos of her thoughts. In a society increasingly driven by ambition, profit, and power, the Templars' emphasis on love as the foundation of action struck her as profoundly countercultural and profoundly necessary. It was a call to transcend self-interest, to serve something greater than oneself, even at great personal cost. Determined to share the Templars' story with the world, she embarked on a journey of her own, drawing upon Roland's chronicle and other hidden archives. She began writing a book that would weave together the historical narrative of the Templars with reflections on their enduring relevance. Her work was meticulous, blending scholarly rigor with a storyteller's passion. She sought not only to recount the Order's triumphs and tragedies, but also to illuminate the timeless lessons embedded within their saga. Yes, she wrote, she found herself revisiting key moments in the Templars' history: their founding in Jerusalem, the betrayal of Bernard de Trémollet, the siege of Acre, and the schism that nearly tore them apart. Each chapter revealed new layers of meaning, connecting the past to the present in ways she had never anticipated. For instance, the Templars' dual identity as warriors and monks mirrored the modern struggle to balance pragmatism with idealism. Their commitment to protecting pilgrims resonated with contemporary efforts to safeguard refugees and marginalized communities, and their ultimate dissolution served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris and the importance of adaptability in the face of change. Her exploration of the Templars' financial innovations led her to reflect on the ethical implications of wealth and power. The Templars had once been both feared and admired for their economic influence, which they wielded not for personal gain but to support their mission. This ethos stood in stark contrast to the greed and exploitation that often characterized modern capitalism. Inspired by their example, she envisioned a future where businesses prioritized social responsibility over profit, where leaders viewed themselves as stewards rather than owners of resources. At the same time, she grappled with the darker aspects of the Templars' legacy. Their militaristic zeal, though born of noble intentions, had sometimes veered into fanaticism, blurring the line between defender and oppressor. Their secrecy, while essential for survival, had also fueled suspicion and mistrust. These complexities reminded her that no institution or individual is immune to error, and that progress requires constant vigilance and self-reflection. Her book, titled Eternal Flame: The Enduring Legacy of the Knights Templar, was published to widespread acclaim. Critics praised its blend of scholarship and storytelling, hailing it as a timely reminder of the values that unite humanity across time and space. Readers from all walks of life were moved by the Templars' story, finding inspiration in their resilience and humility. Some saw in the Templars a model for grassroots activism, while others drew parallels to spiritual movements seeking to reclaim ancient wisdom in a rapidly changing world. For the historian, the true reward lay not in accolades but in the impact her work had on others. She received letters from readers around the globe, sharing how the Templars' legacy had inspired them to take action in their own lives. A teacher in Kenya wrote about using the book to spark discussions among students about justice and empathy. An entrepreneur in Silicon Valley described adopting the Templars' principles of service and integrity in his company's operations. A refugee advocate in Europe credited the book with renewing her commitment to helping those in need, despite the challenges she faced. Encouraged by these responses, she decided to expand her efforts beyond writing. She founded an organization dedicated to promoting the Templars' core values: faith, honor, sacrifice, and love in practical ways. The initiative brought together individuals and groups working toward common goals, fostering collaboration across disciplines and cultures. Together, they launched projects ranging from educational programs to environmental conservation efforts, each grounded in the belief that meaningful change begins with small, intentional actions. One such project focused on preserving cultural heritage sites threatened by conflict and neglect, drawing inspiration from the Templars' role as guardians of sacred places. Volunteers worked tirelessly to restore crumbling churches, synagogues, and mosques, ensuring that these spaces remained accessible to future generations. Another initiative provided training and resources to grassroots leaders advocating for peace and reconciliation in divided communities. By empowering local voices, the program aimed to create sustainable solutions rooted in mutual understanding and respect. Through it all, the historian remained mindful of the lessons she had learned from the Templars. She understood that success was not measured by grand achievements but by the cumulative effect of countless small acts of kindness and courage. Like the Templars before her, she embraced the paradox of striving for greatness while remaining humble, knowing that true strength lies not in domination but in service. Years later, as she stood on a hill overlooking Paris, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The Templars' story had transformed her life, awakening a sense of purpose she had never known. But more importantly, it had reminded her that the past is never truly past, that the choices we make today ripple outward, shaping the world long after we are gone. In the distance, the city lights flickered to life, casting a warm glow over the landscape. Somewhere among those streets and alleys, the spirit of the Templars lived on, carried forward by ordinary people doing extraordinary things. The eternal flame they had kindled so long ago continued to burn brightly, illuminating the path for those who dared to dream of a better tomorrow. And so, the circle remained unbroken, not as an ending, but as a promise. For as long as there are hearts willing to fight for justice, minds eager to seek truth, and souls yearning for connection, the Templars' legacy will endure, a beacon of hope in an ever-changing world.